Today, our mission is, well, it's to unpack something really critical and, honestly, often misunderstood: rare earth elements.
And the whole geopolitical swirl around them, yeah.
Exactly. We're going to look closely at what some call a master plan for these minerals. The stuff that's in basically everything: your phone, EVs.
Vital stuff.
Totally vital. And we're asking, did certain policies really build strategic independence? Or did they maybe create other kinds of challenges?
Unforeseen consequences, perhaps.
Right. This deep dive is really for you listening, trying to cut through that noise and get to the key insights. Okay, let's dive right in. Forget the usual sound bites, the breaking news headlines for a minute.
Yeah, let's get past the surface.
We want to expose how maybe a master plan for rare earths, thinking specifically about policies from the Trump administration, might have been less of a strategic win.
And more of a rush.
A rush, yeah, but potentially into environmental risks and definitely some industrial uncertainty.
What's really fascinating here, I think, is how these short-term fixes, these quick solutions, can sometimes create much bigger long-term vulnerabilities. We need to look at the whole picture.
Absolutely. So as we go through this, we're asking some key questions, like, is it really possible to get truly independent using regulatory shortcuts and, express bailouts?
Good question.
And why are millions of tons of minerals reportedly ending up stuck in deposits, not finding a real market?
Bottleneck issue.
Yeah. And can speeding up mining permits to just, 10 days? Can that really protect our water, our aquifers, and local communities?
The trade-offs there are huge.
Then there's the international angle. Does it make sense to kind of isolate ourselves with tariffs when collaboration seems so key to diversifying where we get this stuff from?
The diplomacy aspect.
And maybe the biggest question: who ends up footing the bill? Environmentally, financially, for policies that kind of live and die by these short-term executive orders?
Who bears the cost, ultimately?
Exactly. We're going to peel back those layers together. And just so you know where we're coming from, we've pulled from a range of sources for this. We're looking at reports from, like, the USGS.
U.S. Geological Survey, yeah.
And the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. Also news analyses, studies from places like the Atlantic Council. Good stuff.
Solid sources to build on.
Okay, let's start with that push for strategic independence. We heard a lot about executive orders, streamlining permits, big money from the Defense Production Act, all aimed at boosting domestic production. Sounds pretty decisive, doesn't it?
Well, the intention certainly looked determined. You saw the Pentagon, for instance, put over $400 million into MP materials.
Right, the big U.S. player.
Yeah, to expand mining and magnet manufacturing here using the Defense Production Act. That's usually for, national emergencies.
So strong signal.
A very strong signal. But, and this is the key thing, that kind of push doesn't automatically create a durable market, something that lasts.
Okay, why not?
Because without long-term guarantees, regulatory certainty, and a clear plan for domestic demand, think consistent EV incentives, tax credits, that sort of thing.
Stuff that sticks around beyond one administration.
Exactly. These big projects become really dependent on who's in charge. So you have to ask, is that real independence? Or is it just like a temporary patch?
Right. Because if an executive order changes or a new president comes in,
the whole structure could wobble, even collapse. You could end up with half-finished projects, taxpayer money spent, and no real integrated value chain.
So you're pointing to a kind of structural fragility there. It lacks that legislative backbone to survive political shifts. That really does challenge the whole independence idea.
It does. It makes it very contingent.
Okay, so if the funding approach has its own set of challenges, what about when the rare earths actually get pulled out of the ground? Are they finding a market, or is there a bottleneck, like you said, further down the line?
Yeah, right.
We hear reports about this disconnect: lots produced, but maybe not so much used.
Yeah, that points directly to a critical demand side problem. While the supply side, the mining, the initial processing was definitely encouraged.
With that funding we just talked about.
Right. But at the same time, incentives for consumers and manufacturers, the people who use these materials, were actually cut or even scrapped.
Like the EV tax credits.
Exactly. Think about the Section 30D Clean Vehicle Credit. It saw major reductions. So the result is this imbalance. You get rare earth oxides, neodymium, praseodymium, piling up in warehouses.
So public money is spent extracting it.
And then it just sits there. It wastes that investment, diverts resources because there aren't stable buyers lined up.
Hmm.
It really highlights that you need an integrated strategy. You can't just focus on digging it up. You need the whole chain working.
Like looking at recycling, too.
Absolutely. Look at China. They're expecting, 400 million tons of old batteries by 2028, and they're investing heavily in a national rare earth recycling system. That market could be worth almost $40 billion soon. That's a demand-side strategy.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Which brings us to another really critical aspect. Speed, specifically the speed of getting mining permits. There was that executive order in March 2025, right? Slashing environmental reviews from months down to just 10 days. The goal was speed, obviously, but what about the consequences? For water, for communities?
Yeah, what's fascinating and frankly concerning is the trade-off being made there and what it costs potentially in the long run.
How so?
Well, cutting that environmental impact review that's under NIPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, which is supposed to ensure thorough checks.
Right, the safe.
Cutting that down to 10 days, it creates serious risks. You might get inadequate review of how mining affects groundwater. You risk uncontrolled toxic waste. And communities, they get minimal chance to participate in decisions impacting their own health and environment.
Are there examples of this going wrong elsewhere?
Definitely. Look at China, again, places like Bayanabo or Jiangxi. Similar fast-track approaches there led to poisoned aquifers, land degradation, serious long-term environmental damage. So, if you gain technological sovereignty, but you sacrifice public health and the environment to do it, is that really independence? Or is it just creating huge environmental debts for the future? Irresponsibility, really.
That's a really stark picture.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got rapid permits, potential supply-demand mismatches. Now let's loop in the international side. Tariffs. The Trump administration put tariffs, pretty high ones, up to 55% on Chinese rare earth imports. The idea, presumably, was pressure on Beijing. But did it work? Especially when people say collaboration is key for diversifying supply.
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, those tariffs definitely provoked a response from China. Retaliation.
What did that look like?
Beijing slapped restrictions on 7 key rare earths, neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, the important ones, and they imposed export license freezes that lasted for months. It created uncertainty.
So it backfired, in a way.
It certainly complicated things. And you have to contrast that approach with the alternative. Building strong alliances, working with countries like Australia or Canada or partners in the EU where projects like UR are actually trying to boost mining and recycling within the bloc.
Or cooperative approaches.
Right. Instead, the protectionist stance, the tariffs, they increased costs for U.S. industries that use rare earths. And it strained relationships with allies we might need to build diverse supply chains. It arguably made the industry more fragile, not less.
So the takeaway there is maybe supply chain diplomacy, not trade walls.
That's certainly what the analysis suggests is more effective for long-term resilience.
Okay, so we've touched on funding, market demand, environmental rules, international trade. This really leads us to the big overarching question, doesn't it? Who ultimately pays the price environmentally and financially for policies that are so reliant on these short-term executive orders?
Yeah, and this raises that fundamental question again. Can a nation really be strategically independent if its policies create such huge potential liabilities down the road?
So who bears those liabilities?
Well, multiple groups. Think about U.S. taxpayers, first off. They're funding multi-million-dollar bailouts like that defense investment in MP materials.
Right.
But the companies getting the money face this uncertainty too, the potential for policies to be revoked. So they might hesitate to commit their own long-term capital without more stable guarantees.
Makes sense. And communities.
Local communities often bear the immediate environmental side effects, contaminated rivers, soil heavy metals, and they often lack the resources to fight long legal battles quickly.
So they're on the front lines.
Directly, and then future administrations, they inherit the mess, basically. They might get stuck with the cleanup bills, the remediation costs, or they have to spend political capital restoring environmental regulations, which just creates these cycles of uncertainty and lawsuits.
It sounds like a focus on speed at any cost, as you put it earlier.
Pretty much. It seems it prioritized that over a truly integrated, sustainable strategy. Without that clear vision for demand, strong environmental standards, and solid alliances, any rare earth plan built on executive orders risks crumbling with the next political change. So, in essence, when you really examine this master plan through the lens of the sources, what you see is a strategy that leaned heavily on regulatory shortcuts.
Which compromise environmental health.
Exactly. and provided reactive subsidies that didn't really build a robust long-term market.
And tariffs that ended up isolating rather than integrating.
Precisely. It wasn't a holistic approach.
So what does this all mean for the bigger picture then? It sounds like strategic independence isn't something you can just patch together quickly with emergency measures or by fast-tracking permits.
No, it seems to require much more coherent long-term policies. Things that guarantee sustained demand, that rigorously protect the environment.
And actively promote international alliances, not hinder them.
Yes. That seems to be the only path towards building a supply chain that's truly resilient and, importantly, sustainable for the 21st century. It really underscores the need for patience,
Yeah.
and clear, stable rules and genuine global cooperation in what is a very interconnected world.
Yeah. Maybe the real revolution we need in rare earths isn't just about speed, no matter the cost. Maybe it's about skillfully combining industrial strategy with environmental ethics and that supply chain diplomacy you
A
mentioned.
much more balanced approach.
Are we as a society ready to demand that kind of long-term vision from our leaders instead of just settling for the quick fixes? It's a tough question. And now we really want to turn it over to you. What are your thoughts on these kinds of policy shortcuts and their ripple effects? Have you seen similar things happen in other strategic areas?
Would love to hear your ideas.
Yeah, share your ideas on how we can better combine that long-term vision, environmental responsibility, and global partnerships to build supply chains that actually work and last.